Today I'm going to be talking about progressive overload and everything you need to know about applying progressive overload to your training. Now, what is progressive overload? Well, it's basically just doing more each time, making your training harder in some way. There's different types of progressive overload, and they include things like adding reps, adding weight, making your reps slower, increasing the range of motion, or adding sets. The most commonly used one is just adding reps and weight. In order to apply progressive overload, you're going to need to track your workouts, and I already made a video on that, so you should watch that before you watch this one. Now I want to talk about reps in reserve, and what I mean by that is basically just like how close you are to failure. So 2 reps in reserve would mean that you stop your set when you could have done 2 more to get to failure. So usually you'd be training from about 2 or 0 reps in reserve. You should be able to add reps or weight whilst keeping your reps in reserve the same. So if you did a set of 10 and your reps in reserve was 1, then that means you could have done 11 all the way to failure, right? And then you come in next time and you do 11, it should also be 1 rep from failure. Because if you do a set of 10 at 1 rep from failure, and then the next time you do 11, that was 2 failure, then you didn't actually progress. Or at least you didn't actually gain any strength, but you are actually progressive overloading in that workout, because you are making the set harder. Hypertrophy or strength drives progressive overload. And what I mean by that is just if you got stronger, then you'll automatically be doing more reps for the same RIR, right? But also progressive overload drives hypertrophy and strength, so you kind of have to force it sometimes. Because if you actually want to get stronger or bigger, you have to apply the progressive overload yourself. Let's say you did 10 reps and you went all the way to failure. And then the next time you did 11 reps all the way to failure. Well, you got stronger. And going all the way to failure is a really good way to see if you're getting stronger. Because if you did 10 reps of failure and then next time you couldn't get 11, well then you know that you didn't get stronger. But if you did 10 reps at 1 RIR and then the next time you did 11 to failure, it's sure you added a rep, but you decrease your RIR, so it's kind of hard to tell. For the most part, I would say relative intensity, or just how close to failure you go, should be fairly standard week to week, and you shouldn't rely on it as a long-term form of progressive overload. I'm not a fan of the idea of starting at 3 RIR and then each week going down to 2 and then 1 and then 0 RIR, because you're not really progressing, you're just going closer to failure, but you didn't actually get stronger. Personally, I don't think RIR is the best way to progressively overload, and as long as you're training within 2 reps from failure, then you're probably good, and just keep that relatively the same week to week. And going to failure is a good way to see if you are actually progressing properly, because if you're always taking 1 set to failure, and you're always progressing in reps or weight for that set, well then you know that you're getting stronger. And when I say stronger, I mean in the context of hypertrophy training. So what about changing your technique for progressive overload? Things like doing pause reps or just doing slower reps, increasing range of motion, things like that. I see these as just sort of a one-time thing that are just improving the quality of your training rather than long-term progression. Sure, if you increase the range of motion or just improve your form, then you are progressively overloading, but you can't just keep increasing your form forever. So any form of progressive overload that's changing your technique or the form that you actually use to do the exercises, then I wouldn't really consider that a reliable method. Increasing your volume or how many sets you do is also another way you can progressively overload. Now obviously this isn't something you could just keep doing forever, because your workouts would be 5 hours. And obviously you would run into jump volume issues and stuff. But if you don't add any reps or weight, but you just add a set, then that's still progressively overloaded. Usually, how you progress with sets is after you take a deload, you start at pretty low sets and you slowly add maybe just 1 set each week up until you're doing a lot of sets, and then you deload and then it sort of goes back down and you start at lower sets again. Now what about frequency or adding another workout to the week? Well, with this one, it's kind of complicated, because when you add another workout to the week, usually you're increasing the weekly volume, usually doubling it. And in that case, you're progressively overloading. But if you keep the volume the same, so let's say you're doing 1 workout for chest and you're doing 6 sets, you're doing it once a week. If you make that twice a week, but then you split it up, doing 3 sets each time, is that really progressively overloading? Because your weekly volume staying the same. But once again, this isn't really like a long-term thing. Maybe you could add one extra workout into the week every now and then, but still just reps and weight are like the main focus. So how do you actually progress with reps and weights? So first you want to choose your rep range, right? Whatever rep range you have. I'm just going to say 10 to 15 for as an example. And obviously you choose your weight. Let's say you're doing barbell curls with 50 pounds for 10 to 15 reps, okay? Now let's just say you're taking it all the way to failure, just to make things simple. So let's say you start at 50 pounds for 10 reps to failure, okay? Then next time you would try to get 11, and then 12, and then 13, 14, and then once you hit about 15, that's when you could increase the weight. And then maybe you could go to 60 pounds for 10, and then you're back at the bottom of your rep range, and then you keep going up through the rep range, and once you hit the top, you increase the weight so that your reps go back down. This is called double progression, and it's where you use reps and weight to progress. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. I mean, you could just, like if your rep range is 10 to 15, then, once you hit 14, you could increase the weight, and then maybe when you increase it, you don't go back to 10, you go back to 12. Like you can add weight more frequently or less frequently. And this depends on how broad your rep range is. You can't really progress with only reps because once you get past 30 reps, it's not effective for hypertrophy. Although doing only weight progressions or just adding weight but keeping your reps the same actually does work pretty well. Like for example, I do this on my deadlifts. Usually doing weight only progressions works better on compound lifts where you're lifting a lot of weights and also in the lower rep ranges. Because let's say you're deadlifting 200 pounds for a set of 5, okay? And if you want to go to 6 reps, well, for your mathematical volume, or I know it sounds complicated, but just like you're adding another rep of 200 pounds, so that's 200 pounds on top of the 1,000 pounds you lifted in those 5 reps, if you know what I mean. What I'm trying to say is that it's a really big jump to add another rep. Like going from 5 reps to 6 reps is kind of a big jump with 200 pounds. Although, if you go to just 205 for 5 reps still, that's just a very small increase. And you can do that very frequently. Like if you got 200 pounds for 5, and then next time you tried for 6, you might not be able to get it. But if next time you did 205 for 5, I mean, you can easily get that right. And also this method is better for strength. But who cares about strength? Usually it's best to use rep and weight progressions together. It depends on a lot of things like the exercise you're doing and the rep range you're in, whether you want to add weight less frequently or more frequently. If your rep range is 6 to 8, for example, you're going to be adding weight more frequently because let's say one day you're doing 100 pounds for 6 reps on bench press, and the next time you do 7, and then once you do 8, you add weight, right? But let's say you're doing, your rep range is 6 to 15, well then you're going to be adding reps each day for a while before you add any weight. And you want to have small, frequent progressions. So just adding 1 rep or 2.5 pounds to the bar, but trying to do that each session. But at the end of the day, as long as you're progressing somehow with reps or weight or both, then the small details come after that. I like something that Peter Kacharian said about this, and he said basically that if you add 50 pounds to your bench press for reps, you better believe your chest is going to be bigger. And of course, considering you're doing that in like a hypertrophy rep range. That's all I have to say for this one, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. See you.